I was called to tonight's cocktail party by Jiang Ciyuan at the last minute. She said the driver was already waiting downstairs and told me to dress decently, not to embarrass her. I dug through my closet and found a dark gray suit she had tossed my way 3 months ago. The price tag was still hanging from the cuff. She had probably long forgotten about this piece of clothing, just as she had forgotten there was still someone like me in that house. The banquet hall was set on the 53rd floor of the Cloudtop Hotel. An entire wall of floor-to-ceiling windows framed half the city's nightscape. When I walked in, no one noticed me. The servers passed me 3 times without even offering a glass of champagne. That was not surprising. Every man in the room was sharply dressed with gleaming watches. My outfit, though neat enough, lacked a certain presence, and presence is something you cannot fake. I did not belong in this circle. Jiang Ciyuan stood in the middle of the crowd, wearing a black satin gown, 2 diamond studs on her earlobes refracting cold light under the chandeliers. She held a wine glass, smiling with an ease that was also razor-sharp. Around her stood 4 or 5 men, all heavyweights whose names carried weight tonight. Lu Zhengting of Huasheng Group, Fang Qiwen of Zunda Capital, and a gray-haired foreigner whose assistant was murmuring translations by his side. I watched her from a distance but did not approach. The first rule 3 years of marriage had taught me, when she is talking business, stay away.
Who's that?
Standing over there all by himself. A woman's voice came from behind me, pitched just loud enough for me to hear. Another female voice picked it up. No idea. Never seen him before.
Probably some company's assistant.
Look at his suit. The tag on the cuff is still attached.
I glanced down at my cuff. Sure enough, the label was still there, a white thread sticking up starkly against the dark gray fabric. I reached over, tore it off, and crumpled it in my palm. Mr. Lu, let me introduce someone. Jiang Ciyuan's voice suddenly lifted, carrying that tone I knew all too well, as if she were presenting a trophy.
She beckoned in my direction.
Several pairs of eyes swiveled toward me at once. I became the focal point.
No, not me, her appendage.
I walked over, my pace unhurried. The second rule 3 years of marriage had taught me, when she beckons you come, but not too fast. Too fast looks cheap, and not too slow means you are publicly undercutting her.
This is my husband, Shen Xu.
Jiang Ciyuan smiled and linked her arm through mine, the movement so fluid it looked rehearsed 1,000 times. Her nails, painted a deep crimson, rested on my sleeve like 5 tiny blades. Hess interning at my company, doing data analysis. So I always joke that Hes my intern husband I recruited. The moment the words left her mouth, Lu Zhengting laughed first.
Fang Qiwen joined in.
After laughing, he gave me a once-over, his gaze carrying an undisguised condescension.
That's a good one, President Jiang.
Intern husband, first time I've heard that. So how's the promotion track at your place? How long before the internship period ends?
Depends on performance.
Jiang Ciyuan took a sip of wine, her eyes flicking toward me. That glance held not a shred of a wife's warmth, only the scrutiny of a superior sizing up a subordinate.
Do the job well, and the contract gets renewed.
Do it poorly. Well, interns are always replaceable.
The people around us laughed again.
The laughter was not loud, but in those few seconds of silence that fell over the banquet hall, it landed on my face like a handful of fine, stinging sand. I stood there, still clutching the torn-off label in my hand. Its edge was a little sharp, digging into my palm.
Xiao Shen, is it?
Lu Zhengting suddenly raised his glass toward me.
Interning under President Jiang, your future is limitless. Where did you study? High City University.
Finance, I said.
High City U.
Not bad.
He nodded, his tone as casual as commenting on the saltiness of a dish. But the finance world is cutthroat these days. A degree alone isn't enough. You need someone to show you the ropes. President Jiang is willing to take you under her wing. That's your good fortune. With that, he turned back to discussing the merger and acquisition with Jiang Ciyuan. I was already outside his field of vision. I retreated 2 steps and returned to the fringes of the crowd. The cocktail party lasted nearly 3 hours. Jiang Ciyuan did not glance at me again the entire time. She locked down a preliminary cooperation framework with Lu Zhengting, booked a lunch meeting with Fang Qiwen for the next day, and finally posed for a photo with the gray-haired foreigner in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Host and guests, all thoroughly pleased. When the party ended, she walked ahead. Her high heels struck the marble floor, the sound crisp and cold. I followed 3 steps behind, exactly the way any dutiful intern should. Inside the elevator, there were only the 2 of us. She leaned against the elevator wall, eyes closed. Under the cold white light, her meticulously applied makeup showed a trace of fatigue.
You performed decently tonight?
Didn't say anything stupid?
Thank you for the affirmation, President Jiang.
She ignored the barb in my tone, or rather she could not care less whether there was a barb. Huacheng will send over a preliminary proposal tomorrow. I need you to organize the data for me. Remember, don't let anyone see the original documents, especially anyone from Zinda.
Got it.
The elevator reached the basement level. As the doors opened, she suddenly called out, "Shen Xu." I turned back.
You took the tag off your cuff?
I thought you were going to parade it around all night. She tossed out the remark and walked away without looking back, heading straight for that black Maybach. The chauffeur opened the door for her.
She bent down and got in.
The moment the car door closed, her phone was already pressed to her ear. I stood in the parking garage for a moment, watching the Maybach's taillights disappear at the top of the ramp. Then I pulled out my phone. 3 unread messages were on the screen. The first was from Assistant Chen, Boss Shen, North America confirmed. The Ludwig Fund has agreed to our 680 million pricing plan.
Awaiting your order.
The second was from the investment director at Zinda Capital. No salutation, no pleasantries, just one line. Lu Zhengting is digging into your background.
I've blocked it on my end, but you'd better move faster.
The third was from an unknown number, containing just 4 words. The Jiang family is panicking.
I deleted all 3 messages one by one.
When I reached the third, my finger hovered over the words. The Jiang family is panicking for 2 full seconds. Then I pocketed my phone and walked toward my silver Audi parked in the corner.
For 3 years, in Jiang Ciyuan's eyes, I was always that guy driving an Audi, living in her house, working as a data analysis intern at her company, her intern husband.
She never knew that this Audi was the cheapest car I owned. She also never knew that the person who had prompted Lu Zhengting to dig into my background was me, using Zinda as bait. On the drive home, I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror. The tag on my cuff was gone, but the label she had pasted on me had been stuck there for 3 years. She had never once thought of peeling it off.
Fine.
Then I would tear it off myself. It was nearly 1 in the morning when I got home. Jiang Ciyuan's Maybach had arrived 20 minutes before me. All the lights in the living room were on. Her high heels lay toppled in the foyer, one standing upright, the other lying on its side, the heels still carrying bits of damp grass clippings from the cocktail party entrance. The air smelled of red wine mingled with perfume, cloying and faintly bitter. She was not in the living room. I changed my shoes, picked up her discarded heels and set them neatly aside. Just as I was about to head upstairs, I heard her voice coming from the second-floor study. The door was not fully closed, it was left ajar by a hand's width. Warm yellow lamplight spilled through the gap, falling on the floor like a slash of a blade. She probably thought I had not come back yet. Or she simply did not care whether I had.
I know.
I have this under control. Jiang Ciyuan's voice drifted through the crack in the door.
Her tone was not loud, but every word was enunciated clearly. Her signature way of speaking when she was in work mode. You don't need to worry about Shen Xu. He's just a tool I keep by my side. Back when I married him, first I needed his household registration status to stabilize the trust endorsement from the Intelligence Bureau. Second, he's genuinely useful, obedient, tight-lipped, no ambition to speak of. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding a bowl of sobering soup that was still steaming. I had made it after coming in. Hawthorn, dried tangerine peel, a few slices of ginger. Her stomach always felt uncomfortable after social engagements. I had been making this soup for 3 years, progressing from clumsy fumbling to practiced ease. The ceramic bowl was hot against my palm, yet my fingertips felt ice cold. Whoever was on the other end of the line said something. Jiang Ciyuan let out a laugh, the kind I rarely heard.
Not the precisely calibrated, appropriate smile she wore when facing clients, but the coldness that seeped out from the marrow of her bones once all pretenses were stripped away.
Feelings? You're overthinking it. To me, has nothing more than a convenient human USB drive, helps me store data, runs errands, acts as a shield. That's it. Once this round of maneuvering against Zinda is finished, once my core intelligence chain closes the loop, hell be of no further use. She paused, her tone as breezy as if she were discussing tomorrow's weather. When the time comes, I'll just find an excuse to divorce him. Anyway, the prenuptial agreement is crystal clear. He won't be able to walk away with a single cent. The steam from the sobering soup rose and blurred my vision. I looked down at the amber-colored liquid in the bowl and suddenly felt that every bowl of soup I had made in these 3 years was a joke.
Huacheng's Lu Zhengting has already taken the bait.
Tomorrow, have legal get the due diligence materials ready. This time, I'm going to swallow Xinda's market share in one gulp. She had changed the subject, but the lingering amusement had not yet faded from her voice. As for Shen Xu, Tomorrow I'll send him to Zinda to handle the data interface. That intern status of his just happens to be useful. The people at Zinda won't be on guard against him. Let him get the floor price data for me. Once he delivers that, his value will be fully squeezed dry. I turned around quietly, carrying the sobering soup back to the kitchen. I set the ceramic bowl down on the marble countertop. It made a soft clink. I stared at that bowl of soup for 10 seconds, then picked it up and drank it all myself, mouthful by mouthful. The soup was scalding. It burned all the way down from my throat to my stomach, but it was not even a tenth as hot as those few sentences that had come out of the study. After finishing, I rinsed the bowl, placed it upside down on the drying rack, wiped my hands dry, and went back to my bedroom at the far end of the hallway. Once the door was shut, I took out another phone. There were only 7 contacts in its address book. Each one was a nail I had spent 3 years planting. One by one, I opened the chat with Shen Xu from Cinda Capital and sent a single message. Tomorrow, Jiang Ciyuan is going to send me to your side to get Huasheng's floor price. Play along with me.
Give me a fake set of data.
Shen Xu's reply came almost instantly. How should I fabricate the numbers?
Get Lu Zhengting from Huasheng to cooperate with you in fabricating them.
Isn't he digging into my background?
Tell him. Once he finds out, do exactly as I say.
After sending the message, I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and lay on my back.
The ceiling was very white.
Like everything else in this house, exquisite, expensive, and utterly devoid of warmth.
This bedroom had been allocated to me by Jiang Ciyuan. At the far end of the hallway, the smallest room, as far from the master bedroom as possible, as far from the study as possible, as far from every radius of her life as possible. In her words, this arrangement allowed us to not disturb each other. I closed my eyes. Her sentence replayed in my head over and over. He's just a tool I keep by my side. The tone was so offhand, like she was talking about a wrench, a stapler, a disposable consumable meant to be thrown in the trash after use. 3 years. I had spent 3 years in this marriage being a human USB drive. But Jiang Ciyuan had forgotten one thing. A USB drive can be formatted.
It can be scrapped.
But the person using the USB drive never stops to think. A USB drive can also be a ticking time bomb. My phone buzzed. It was the last message from Shen Xu. By the way, Boss Shen, the Ludwig side is asking when the 680 million capital pool can be activated. I replied with 2 words. Very soon. The next morning at 7 o'clock, Jiang Ciyuan's Maybach pulled out of the garage right on time. She did not wait for me, nor did she ask how I would get to the office. These matters were never within the scope of her consideration. I drove my silver Audi and followed behind, keeping a distance of 3 cars, neither too far nor too close. I had maintained this exact distance for 3 years. She had never once noticed. By the time I got to the office, her secretary was already standing beside my workstation waiting. Shen Xu, President Jiang wants you in her office. The secretary never looked up at me when calling my name. The printed work assignment sheet was far more important than my face. Jiang Ciyuan's office was the innermost one on the top floor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows lay the city's skyline, a gray-blue sky pressing down on the tops of the high-rises like a wrung-out rag. She sat behind her desk. 3 documents were spread open on its surface, and a fountain pen was twirling between her fingers, the cap still on, just spinning.
Sit.
She did not look up. I sat down in the chair across from her, half a head lower than her own seat. She had deliberately replaced it, ensuring that everyone who sat in that chair was physically lower than her was part of Jiang Ciyuan's management philosophy. Zinda has a data interface meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock. You will attend, she said, pushing a document toward me. The cover read, Huasheng Group M&A Project, Internal Data Summary. Your task is to obtain Zinda's floor price evaluation data for Huasheng. Remember, you're going as an intern analyst on a learning exchange, not to negotiate. Keep your posture low that way. They won't be on guard against you. I flipped open the document. Inside were basic materials on Huasheng Group and the investment structure diagram of Cinda Capital. The information was comprehensive, so comprehensive that any real intern would have felt immensely flattered to receive it. But I knew that all the key numbers in this document had been altered. It was a smokescreen she had deliberately released.
Finished reading?
Her spinning pen stopped.
Finished.
The objective is very clear. Acquire Zinda's true floor price for Huasheng. She leaned forward, her elbows propped on the desk, those beautiful eyes fixed on me, her tone like she was assigning KPIs to a subordinate. You've been interning under me for 3 years. Handling such a small matter should be doable, right? Do it well, and I'll consider letting you convert to a permanent position early.
When she said the words convert to a permanent position,
The corner of her mouth lifted.
That curve, it was exactly the same as the one she wore last night at the cocktail party when she introduced her intern husband to everyone. Understood. I closed the document and stood up. Shen Xu. She stopped me. I turned around.
Don't let me down.
The moment she finished saying those 4 words, her gaze was already on the next document. Her fountain pen tapped the desk, the signal to leave. I walked out of her office and pulled the door shut. Passing by the secretary's station, I heard the hum of the printer coming from inside. Back at my workstation, I turned on the computer and pulled up the file Fang Qiyuan had sent via email at 3 in the morning. The file name looked entirely unremarkable. Huasheng Group Basic Data Backup, and the size was just over 300 kilobytes. But every single figure in the floor price data inside was a number that Lu Zhengting and Fang Qiyuan had jointly fabricated. Huasheng's true psychological floor price towards Zinda was 4.2 billion. The fake floor price Fang Qiyuan had fabricated for me was 5.8 billion, a difference of 1.6 billion. If Jiang Ciyuan formulated her acquisition strategy based on this fake data, her radiant capital would swallow Huasheng's shares at a price far above market value. When the time came, once the capital chain tightened, a hole would appear in the Jiang family's entire business empire, a hole no one could plug. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I appeared right on time in Zinda Capital's conference room. Fang Qiyuan sat across the long table, his suit immaculate, his hair combed meticulously, the standard image of a professional investor. Next to him sat 2 analysts, a man and a woman, both very young, probably actual interns. Analyst Shen from Radiant Capital, welcome, welcome. Fang Qiyuan stood and shook my hand, the pressure perfectly calibrated, his eyes containing a message only the 2 of us could read.
The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours.
Fang Qiyuan and his team presented Zinda's evaluation report on Huasheng in detail. The PowerPoint slides flipped through over 40 pages, the charts gaudily elaborate. Those 2 real interns scribbled furiously in their notebooks, having no idea that the data they were recording was fabricated from start to finish. After the meeting, Fang Qiyuan escorted me alone to the elevator lobby. Boss Shen, the Ludwig side formally confirmed this morning. The 680 million US dollars can be deployed at any time. He lowered his voice and spoke very quickly.
When do you intend to reveal your identity?
After she digests this batch of fake data, I said, pressing the elevator button. One more thing. Fang Qiyuan's expression turned a few degrees more serious. Over on the Jiang family side, Jiang Ciyuan's father, Jiang Guotao, has been making inquiries everywhere lately, trying to find out the identity of the actual controller behind Huayao Capital. He hasn't connected L Capital to you yet, but his suspicions are already aroused. That man has a very keen nose.
The elevator doors opened.
I stepped in and just before the doors closed, looked back at Fang Qiyuan. Let him dig. The deeper he digs, the faster he falls into the pit. As the elevator descended, I leaned against the metal wall, watching the floor numbers tick down one by one.
What played in my mind was not Jiang Ciyuan.
Not Fang Qiyuan.
Not the 680 million.
It was my mother. 3 years ago, the Shen Corporation that my mother had run for 20 years was driven into bankruptcy by a meticulously designed hostile takeover orchestrated by Jiang Guotao. She stood on the rooftop of the company building. When the security guard stopped her, Jiang Ciyuan was in the top floor office of this very building, signing the first investment agreement for her takeover of Radiant Capital. That father-daughter duo had stepped on the corpses of the Shen family to complete the critical juncture of the Jiang family's second-generation succession. From that day on, I had been waiting for an opportunity that Jiang Ciyuan would hand to me with her own hands. Now she had delivered the opportunity right into my grasp. She had even thoughtfully used a fake document to teach me how to steal data, and with one phrase, intern husband, had defined the entire value of my 3 years. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened to the bustling lobby.
I walked out.
My phone rang. It was Jiang Ciyuan.
Did you get the data?
Got it,
I said, gripping the USB drive in my hand, the one containing the fake floor price of 5.8 billion.
I'll bring it back to you.
Good.
I'll wait in my office. She hung up, as curt and decisive as always, like severing everything she deemed unimportant. I slipped the USB drive into my trouser pocket and pushed through the revolving doors of Zinda Tower. Outside, the sky had already darkened. The streetlights were not yet on, and the entire street was submerged in a murky grayish blue. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of car exhaust and the deepening chill of late autumn. Once I handed this fake data to Jiang Ciyuan tonight, the pawn would have crossed the river. She thought she was playing chess, that I was a disposable pawn on the board she could remove at any time. What she did not know was that the person sitting on the other side of the board had always been the intern husband she had kept at home for 3 years. On the 4th day after I handed over the fake data, Jiang Ciyuan made her move. She launched the first round of the acquisition offer toward Huasheng Group in the name of Radiant Capital, bidding 5.8 billion, 1.6 billion higher than Huasheng's true valuation.
Lu Zhengting played his part flawlessly.
First, he feigned reluctance for 2 days, then reluctantly accepted the preliminary intent, even releasing word that Zinda Capital was also bidding, whipping the atmosphere into a frenzy.
Jiang Ciyuan became more and more convinced she had seized the initiative.
Her entire being was like a blade drawn from its sheath, razor-sharp and gleaming. Those few days, she walked through the office with a wind at her back. I sat at my workstation against the wall. Every day I watched her stride through the corridor in her high heels, followed by a swarm of project managers in suits. Her speaking pace was twice as fast as usual, her gestures decisive and forceful, like a hawk that had locked onto its prey. When she passed my workstation, she occasionally threw me a glance, the meaning of which I understood perfectly. You did well, and your value ends here. She believed 5.8 billion was Zingda's true floor price. She believed she was swallowing Huasheng, a piece of fat meat. She had no idea that what she was swallowing was a ticking time bomb. The countdown had already begun. On the evening of the 5th day, I received an encrypted email from Assistant Chen. The subject line contained only one line: final signing procedure confirmed. The attachment was a detailed transaction structure diagram. The capital flows among the 4 parties: Ludwig Fund, L Capital, Huasheng Group, and Zinda Capital, were marked with absolute clarity, like a precision circuit board. All lines ultimately converged on a single node. The main investment position of L Capital's 680 million US dollars. Assistant Chen had added one line at the end of the email: Boss Shen, Mr. Richard from Ludwig asks whether you will attend the signing in person.
I looked at this line.
My finger hovered over the keyboard for a long time.
3 years.
3 years of sitting in my Audi, following behind her Maybach. 3 years of making sobering soup, tearing off cuff labels, playing the meek and harmless intern husband in front of all her friends. For 3 years, every time she offhandedly introduced me to others, I smiled and nodded like a true human USB drive, not questioning, not fighting, not resisting. Now it was my turn to enter the arena. I typed my reply. Confirmed attendance. In the capacity of founder of L Capital, the moment I pressed send, I heard the sound of the door opening from the living room.
Jiang Ciyuan was back.
I shut my laptop and walked out of the bedroom. She was changing her shoes in the foyer. Tonight, she was not wearing high heels but a pair of flats, carrying 2 shopping bags printed with luxury brand logos. When she saw me, she gave a smile that was uncharacteristically not entirely businesslike. Or rather, it was not a smile. It was a victor's final act of mercy toward a pawn before cleaning up the battlefield. The acquisition is basically locked in. The formal agreement gets signed next week. She tossed the bags onto the sofa and stretched, a note of relaxation in her voice that I had never heard before. Lu Zhengting from Huasheng softened today. 5.8 billion, not a cent less. Zinda was a beat too slow. By the time they come to their senses, the contract will already be signed.
Congratulations, I said, my tone as flat as if I were congratulating a not-so-close colleague on hitting a quarterly KPI.
She glanced at me, probably thinking the reaction was too bland, not matching the level of attentiveness expected of an intern husband. But she did not probe further. Her mood was too good right now, too good to bother noticing any anomaly in me. In her eyes, my task was complete. I was like a lemon squeezed dry of all its juice. All that remained was the step of being tossed into the trash. You don't need to attend the signing ceremony next week, she said, pouring herself a glass of red wine. She leaned against the marble kitchen island, the rim of the glass resting against her lower lip. You couldn't handle that kind of occasion, and besides, your status isn't really appropriate to attend.
What status?
I asked. She took a sip of wine and did not answer. But the answer was written in the air, written in the slight upward curve at the corner of her mouth, written in every moment over these 3 years when she had made me take half a step back. Intern. Tool. A human USB drive to be discarded after use.
Oh, right.
She set down her wine glass, pulled a box out of one of the shopping bags, and handed it to me.
Got you a watch?
Consider it a bonus for this project.
I took the box and opened it.
Inside was an entry-level mechanical watch. Not terrible, but by no means good. Probably a free gift she had picked up while buying other things to round out a promotion. A price tag was still stuck on the dial, 6,800 yuan. She had not even bothered to tear it off. My mind flashed again to the figure in the email, Fang Qiyuan had sent at 3 in the morning. 680 million US dollars. The Ludwig Fund's trust endorsement of L Capital, the recognition from North American capital circles, the entire chess game I had laid out through 3 years of endurance. 6,800 and 680 million. The decimal point was off by 5 places.
Thanks.
I closed the box.
Jiang Ciyuan carried her wine glass upstairs.
At the bend of the staircase, she suddenly turned back.
Shen Xu, you've worked hard these days.
Once the acquisition wraps up, let's have a proper talk.
A proper talk.
I guessed what she wanted to talk about was divorce.
That suited me just fine. It saved me the trouble of bringing it up first.
Back in the bedroom, I turned on my phone. Fang Qiyuan had sent the detailed schedule for the signing day, next Wednesday at 10 in the morning, in the business hall on the 51st floor of the Cloud Top Hotel. Radiant Capital and Huasheng Group would first conduct a face-to-face signing, and then, via a transnational video link, complete the final step of the capital transfer with the Ludwig Fund. The entire process was expected to last 30 minutes. She had prepared 3 months for those 30 minutes, never knowing that I had turned them into a countdown. Assistant Chen sent another message, Boss Shen, your custom suit has been delivered. If it fits, I'll pick you up 3 hours early on signing day for styling. I replied with one word, okay. Then I took that 6,800 yuan mechanical watch out of its box and placed it on the nightstand. The dial reflected the lamplight. The second hand ticked forward, each tick counting down the remaining moments of Jiang Ciyuan's victory. 3 days from now, this drama 3 years in the making would change its lead actor. The day of the signing, the weather was shockingly good. November in the north of the city rarely saw sunlight this crystalline. The floor-to-ceiling windows on the 51st floor of the Cloud Top Hotel framed the entire sky into a painting. I stood in the coffee shop across from the hotel, watching through the glass as Jiang Ciyuan stepped out of her Maybach. She wore a white tailored suit dress today, a pearl brooch pinned to the lapel, her hair swept up to reveal a slender neck and a pair of diamond earrings. Behind her were 4 assistants, each carrying folders of varying thickness, like an elite squad marching toward the battlefield. Lu Zhengting had arrived 15 minutes earlier than her. I watched from the car as his Rolls-Royce pulled up to the hotel entrance. The chauffeur opened the door for him. After stepping out, he adjusted his tie, wearing the smile of a hunter watching his prey walk into the trap. He knew what would happen today, but he would not tell anyone in advance, because the director of this show was me, and he was an actor on my payroll. 9:45 in the morning. My phone buzzed. Fang Qiyuan's message, Boss Lu is in position. Conference room equipment has been tested.
Mr.
Richard from Ludwig is standing by online. I replied with 2 words, received.
950.
A black Mercedes-Benz van stopped at the entrance of the Cloud Top Hotel. The door opened, and out stepped a gray-haired foreign man in a navy suit, followed by 2 attendants carrying briefcases. This was Richard Hoffman, the Asia-Pacific representative of the Ludwig Fund, and the person Jiang Ciyuan believed to be the most important guest of the day. What she did not know was that Richard's presence was not because of her, but because of me. L Capital was the Ludwig Fund's largest strategic partner in the Asia-Pacific region. If I asked him to come, he would come.
9:55.
The coffee shop server came over to ask if I wanted a refill. I said no. The check, please. While scanning the QR code to pay, my phone screen lit up. It was a WeChat message from Jiang Ciyuan. I opened it. There was only one line. After the acquisition concludes today, let's talk. Talk about us. She could not even be bothered to type the word divorce, but the meaning was clear enough. I swiped the message away without replying. Today, someone would indeed have a talk about what lay between them, except it would not be her bringing it up. I would be the one to decide. 9:58. I pushed open the coffee shop door and walked into the lobby of the Cloud Top Hotel. The lobby attendant had clearly been trained. Upon seeing the Keaton custom suit I was wearing, he immediately approached and asked what assistance I needed. I said the business hall, 51st floor. He promptly swiped the elevator card for me, his attitude as deferential as if I were the very last person who should be showing up today. As the elevator rose, I looked at myself in the mirrored metal wall.
Black suit.
Charcoal gray shirt.
No tie, deliberate.
This was the first time I was standing before Jiang Ciyuan as Shen Xu, not as her husband, not as an intern at her company, not as any of the cheap labels she had pinned on me. The top button of the shirt was left undone, the collar slightly open, revealing an inch of skin above the collarbone. On my wrist was not the 6,800 yuan entry-level mechanical watch she had given me, but a Patek Philippe, a gift Richard from the Ludwig Fund had bid on and given me at an auction in New York last year. Engraved on the back of the dial were 4 letters, L, cap. 10 o'clock sharp, the elevator doors opened on the 51st floor. The entrance to the business hall was a set of heavy oak double doors. Closed, a radiant Capital administrative assistant stood outside. When she saw me, she froze for a second and opened her mouth to say something. I did not give her the chance. I reached out and pushed the doors open directly. The conference room was vast. People sat on both sides of the long table. On the left was the Huasheng Group team, Lu Zhengting seated in the middle. On the right was the Radiant Capital team, Jiang Ciyuan at the head, her 4 assistants behind her. At the far end of the long table hung a massive electronic screen showing the transnational video link. Richard Hoffman and his team appeared in the center of the screen, the background being the Ludwig Fund's conference room in Manhattan, New York, with the Hudson River skyline visible outside the window. Everyone's gaze swiveled simultaneously toward the door. Jiang Ciyuan's first reaction upon seeing me was a frown. Her fingers tapped the tabletop. She called my name in a lowered voice, her tone carrying an irritated impatience. Shen Xu, what are you doing here?
I told you didn't need to come today.
I ignored her. I walked straight into the conference room. My leather shoes stepped across the dark gray carpet without making a sound. Yet each step seemed to press on everyone's taut nerves. Because my pace was too steady, my demeanor too composed. This did not look like a man who had walked into the wrong room.
Lu Zhengting was the first to stand, offering a slight nod.
The movement was so subtle it was almost imperceptible, but Jiang Ciyuan caught it. Her frown deepened, her gaze swept rapidly back and forth between me and Lu Zhengting. Her instincts were screaming that something was off, but her brain had not yet caught up. Richard Hoffman on the screen saw me too. He broke into a standard Wall Street smile and spoke into the camera. His voice came through the surround sound speakers in the conference room. His English crisp and clear. Mr.
Shen, good to see you, finally.
Finally. That adverb was far too precise. The air in the conference room felt like someone had pressed the pause button. All the Radiant Capital employees were stunned, including Jiang Ciyuan. She whipped her head toward Richard on the screen, then whipped back to look at me. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. After a moment she found her voice. You know him? President Jiang, I said, settling into the empty chair across from her, the only empty chair in the entire room, positioned exactly opposite her, a long table between us like an entire river dividing 2 warring states. Hold off on signing just yet. I came to inform everyone present of something. My voice was not loud, but the conference room was too silent, so silent that each word drove into everyone's ears like a nail.
El Capital has decided to indefinitely freeze all capital allocations for the 680 million US
dollars in this transaction. The moment these words fell, the expression on Jiang Ciyuan's face solidified. It was not the solidifying of shock. Shock is instantaneous and violent, like a bucket of ice water thrown in your face. Her solidification was gradual, seeping from the inside out, like someone walking on ice when the surface suddenly cracks. She had not yet sunk, but she already knew there was no escape. Her fingers clutched the document in front of her. Her knuckles turned white.
What did you say?
Her voice was very soft. So soft it was as if she were asking a question to which she already knew the answer. You said El Capital? You are with El Capital? I am not with El Capital. I leaned back in my chair and looked into her eyes, enunciating every word.
Jiang Ciyuan, I am the founder of El Capital.
As my words fell, the entire conference room went silent for 5 full seconds. In those 5 seconds, no one spoke.
No one coughed.
No one dared touch the documents in front of them. Lu Zhengting lifted his coffee cup and took a sip, his movement as natural as watching a play that had been rehearsed countless times. On the screen, Richard nodded slightly, as if confirming a fact he had known all along. The color drained from Jiang Ciyuan's face. Her meticulously applied makeup could not conceal the collapse she was experiencing in this moment. She sat frozen in her chair, like a robot from which every power source had been ripped out.
This is impossible.
She shook her head. You worked at my company for 3 years.
You collected a monthly intern salary of 7,000 yuan.
You drive an Audi A4.
I drove an Audi for 3 years because I didn't want you to know there are 6 other cars in my garage. I interrupted her, my tone so calm it surprised even me.
I collected 7,000 a month at your company because every single transaction at El Capital is enough to buy your entire company outright. I lived in the smallest bedroom at the far end of your hallway because I have never once treated that place as a home. From start to finish, your marriage was nothing but a trap. When I said this, I felt something lift off my shoulders. 3 years. All the endurance, all the retreats, all the moments she had so casually humiliated me, they all found an exit in this one sentence. I did not shout. I did not pound the table. I did not do anything that she would deem undignified. I simply sat in that chair across from her and, using the same polite, icy tone she had taught me, returned everything she had ever given me. Jiang Ciyuan's fingers were trembling. Her whole body was trembling, like a bird drenched in a rainstorm.
This is impossible, she repeated, her voice having changed register entirely.
Mr. Richard, I turned to the screen and switched to English. Please confirm my identity to everyone present. Richard pushed his glasses up his nose, his expression serious and businesslike. His voice came through the surround sound and spread across the entire conference room. Mr. Shen Xu, founder and CEO of L Capital, Asia Pacific registered filing number LCAP 002, global strategic partner of the Ludwig Fund. Estimated personal net worth. He paused and glanced down at the document in his hand. 1.2 billion U.S. dollars.
1.2 billion U.S.
dollars. This figure landed in the calm water like a boulder. The Radiant Capital team erupted. The legal director sitting next to Jiang Ciyuan was the first to change color. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Jiang Ciyuan had no reaction. She just stared at me fixedly. Something was rapidly gathering in her eye sockets, but she bit her lip, desperately holding it back from falling. Within 3 days, if Radiant Capital cannot complete the capital transfer for the acquisition offer toward Huasheng Group, you will need to pay liquidated damages of 15% of the contract amount. I stood up and buttoned my suit jacket, calculated at the 5.8 billion offer. That comes to roughly 870 million.
President Jiang, you should be able to run this math even better than I can.
I turned and walked toward the door. Shen Xu. Jiang Ciyuan's voice chased after me from behind, trembling in a way I had never heard before.
Why are you doing this?
I stopped but did not turn back. You will know the answer to that tomorrow. As I pushed open the oak doors, I heard the sound of shattering porcelain behind me. I did not know if she had smashed a coffee cup or swept something off the table. But none of those noises mattered, because once the door closed, the larger door between us had also slammed shut for good. Jiang Ciyuan did not wait until the next day. That very evening, after the signing was frozen, the entire Jiang family erupted like a hornet's nest that had been poked.
Jiang Guotao's phone had not stopped ringing since 4 in the afternoon.
Having navigated the financial world for 30 years, he understood all too well what the freezing of 680 million U.S. dollars meant. It meant that Radiant Capital not only could not swallow Huasheng, but would also have to cough up nearly 900 million in liquidated damages. It meant the capital empire the Jiang family had built over 3 generations would begin to collapse in a chain reaction within a month. It meant banks, suppliers, and investors would swarm in like sharks smelling blood and tear the Jiang family to shreds. At 8 o'clock that evening, my law firm sent a formal letter to Radiant Capital, announcing that L Capital was indefinitely withdrawing capital cooperation from all projects associated with the Jiang Group. The email was copied to 28 investment institutions, 7 banks, and the legal department of Huasheng Group. Fang Qiwen later told me that the moment Jiang Guotao received the email, he smashed his phone on the spot, the screen splintering into a spider web, and Jiang Ciyuan locked herself in her office for 4 full hours. The coffee her secretary brought in was carried out untouched stone cold, but none of these things were what made her truly break down. What made her truly break down came the next day. At 10 o'clock the next morning, I had Assistant Chen, in the name of L Capital, send a meeting invitation to Jiang Ciyuan personally and to all senior executives of Radiant Capital. The subject line of the invitation was very brief. An explanation regarding the security risk assessment of Radiant Capital's decision-making level over the past 3 years. Attached was an audio file lasting 3 minutes and 47 seconds. When Jiang Ciyuan clicked on that audio, she could never have imagined that the voice inside would be her own. It was a phone call recording. The content of the recording was her conversation with someone that night, the one she had in the second-floor study after returning from the cocktail party. Her voice lowered. Every single word was crystal clear, dissecting all the carefully maintained pretenses of her 3 years with the precision of a scalpel.
You don't need to worry about Shen Xu.
Hez just a tool I keep by my side. Back when I married him, first I needed his household registration status to stabilize the trust endorsement from the Intelligence Bureau. Second, Hez genuinely useful, obedient, tight-lipped, no ambition to speak of. Feelings. You're overthinking it. To me, Hez nothing more than a convenient human USB drive. Helps me store data, runs errands, acts as a shield. That's it. Once this round of maneuvering against Zinda is finished, once my core intelligence chain closes the loop, hell be of no further use.
When the time comes,
I'll just find an excuse to divorce him.
Anyway, the prenuptial agreement is crystal clear. He won't be able to walk away with a single cent. The moment the recording finished playing, a deathly stillness fell over the entire conference room. All 12 senior executives of Radiant Capital were present, including the legal director, the CFO, and 3 regional general managers. They sat on both sides of the long table. Every face looked as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice water at it. They recognized Jiang Ciyuan's voice. They knew it too well to deny it, too well to defend against it. The legal director sitting next to Jiang Ciyuan quietly shifted his chair half an inch away. The movement was so subtle it was almost invisible, but Jiang Ciyuan saw it. Her gaze followed the direction of that retreat, and then retracted back to her hands, which were clasped together on the table. Those hands had been trembling since the recording started, and they had not stopped. This recording, I said, seated at the other end of the long table, my fingers tapping lightly on the document in front of me, was made that night while you were on the phone. My phone was placed at the study door and recorded it. The door was not closed properly, and your voice carried out very clearly.
You probably forgot there is a smart speaker on the foyer cabinet outside your study.
It is networked and can record ambient sounds around the room in real time. I spent 3 years being an invisible man in your house. The biggest advantage of that is that I have mapped out every single corner. You, Jiang Ciyuan's voice caught in her throat, as if someone had seized her by the neck. Her eyes reddened, her lips quivered. She wanted to say something, but could not piece together a single complete word. It was not that she had not thought of fighting back, but faced with the stares of 12 senior executives, faced with the voice in the recording that was so cutting and cold it was horrifying, faced with all the evidence I had thrown onto the table, any counterattack from her was like a drowning person flailing their arms, apart from splashing some water. It achieved absolutely nothing. In these 3 years, I stood up and walked over beside her chair. Not too close, just enough for everyone to hear me clearly. I woke up every morning at 7 to make you sobering soup. When you didn't come home, I kept it in a thermos. When you forgot documents on a business trip, I drove 40 kilometers to deliver them to the airport. On your mother's birthday, when you forgot, I bought the gift and delivered it in your place.
Did you think I did all those things because I was afraid of you?
Because I couldn't live without you? Because I cared about this marriage? I looked down at her. Her lashes were fluttering violently. Tears had already spilled over her eyelids, tracking down her cheeks and leaving 2 dark splotches on the collar of her white suit. I did all of it because I needed you to trust me completely. I spoke very slowly, each word like a brick laid in a wall, stacked up in front of her piece by piece.
You do not trust someone who fights back.
So the person by your side had to be obedient, had to have no ambition, had to be someone you could trample underfoot and who would still be grateful to you.
Jiang Ciyuan, 3 years.
I acted for 3 years, just to make you hand me the knife with your own hands. She finally lifted her head. In her eyes as she looked at me were shock, fury, fear, but even more so, a despair that seeped out from the marrow of her bones. Because in my eyes, she saw the answer. I did not love her.
I never had.
Every time in these 3 years she had used me as a tool, every time she had contemptuously called me her intern husband, every time she had stripped away my dignity in front of everyone, I had been silently counting the days in my heart, not waiting for her to turn around, but waiting for her destruction. The full version of the recording has already been submitted to the Business Ethics Review Board and 3 mainstream financial media outlets. I pulled a USB drive from the inner pocket of my suit jacket and placed it in front of her. Of course, this is a backup copy. Consider it a memento. A souvenir, you know, just like that 6,800 yuan watch you gave me. She glanced down at the USB drive and suddenly jerked her hand back as if it had burned her. Then she did something no one expected. She slid off her chair. She did not faint.
She crumpled.
Her knees hit the carpet with a muffled thud. She collapsed in a heap next to her own high heels, the skirt of her white suit spreading out on the floor like an overturned porcelain vase. Her tears were completely out of control now. No sound, just large drops raining down, hitting the carpet, hitting the backs of her own hands. Of the 12 senior executives present, not one stepped forward to help her up. Every gaze turned to me, as if watching the final verdict of a trial. Shen Xu. Her voice was so hoarse it was unrecognizable, every word sounding like it was squeezed out of the depths of her throat. Please stop, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Take the recording back. Whatever you want, I'll do it. What do I want? I crouched down in front of her, bringing myself eye level with her. The makeup on her face was completely ruined, her eyeliner smeared by tears, leaving 2 black trails at the corners of her eyes. I looked at her and realized that in this moment, I felt absolutely nothing in my heart. No satisfaction, no ache, no anger, not the slightest ripple.
I want you to also have a taste, I said, my voice so low only she could hear, of what it feels like to have someone crush your dignity underfoot and still have to say thank you with a smile.
I straightened up and addressed everyone in the conference room. Today's meeting is adjourned. Regarding the subsequent risk assessment report on Radiant Capital, L Capital will publicly release it within 48 hours. If any of you wish to jump ship before it sinks, there is still time. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me came the sound of Jiang Ciyuan sobbing, a cry she could no longer suppress. It sounded like something shattering, or like something being ripped out by the roots at last. I pushed open the conference room doors. The corridor was bright with sunlight. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched the skyline of this perpetually busy city. I stood by the window. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Fang Qiwen.
Jiang Guotao just called for an ambulance.
Has been taken to the central hospital emergency room. I looked at this message and thought of the woman standing on that rooftop 3 years ago. The wind had been strong that day. My mother's white hair was blown loose. When the security guard grabbed her from behind, her whole body was like a leaf blown off a tree. The wind that day was just as cold as the wind blowing from the air conditioning vent in this corridor today. I pocketed my phone and walked out of the Radiant Capital building. The news that Jiang Guotao had been rushed into the emergency room spread throughout the entire financial circle by 3 o'clock that afternoon. I sat in my office at L Capital headquarters on Financial Street. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows lay the most expensive stretch of skyline in this city. Assistant Chen placed a tablet in front of me. On the screen was a photo, Jiang Guotao lying on a stretcher being pushed into the emergency entrance of Central Hospital. Jiang Ciyuan followed behind, her white suit still carrying the dust from the conference room carpet, her hair half loose, the makeup on her face a complete mess. Someone had snapped this photo and posted it online. Within 20 minutes, it had been shared over 10,000 times. Every word in the comments section was peeling the skin off the Jiang family. Boss Shen, the first phase has been executed completely. Assistant Chen stood in front of the desk. His tone as steady as if he were reporting the weather. We have withdrawn Radiant Capital's 3 core supply chain channels in the East China region. 7 subsidiary companies under Huayao Capital have simultaneously terminated raw material procurement contracts with the Jiang Group. Currently, the Jiang family's manufacturing sector in East China has ground to a halt. Estimated production lines will completely shut down within 3 days.
And the second phase?
I asked.
The banks have already received our risk assessment report. ICBC and China Merchants Bank simultaneously froze 2 credit lines for the Jiang Group this afternoon, totaling 530 million. The risk control director at China Construction Bank just called, asking if we are interested in taking over the plot of land the Jiang family owns in the south of the city. I looked at the photo on the tablet screen of Jiang Guotao being pushed into the emergency room. My fingers tapped lightly on the desk twice. 3 days ago, Jiang Ciyuan had sat in her office, tapping her desk with that uncapped fountain pen, telling me that interns should keep a low posture. 3 days later, her father lay in the emergency room. Her company's capital chain had snapped, and her suppliers had collectively turned against her.
What goes around, comes around.
No, fortune never turns by itself. It is always pushed by people.
Third phase.
Release the information to the media.
I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking at the building across the street. Radiant Capital's headquarters was right there, 12 floors lower than mine. Compile the evidence of Jiang Guotao's hostile takeover of Shen Corporation back then, along with today's recording incident, package it all together and send it to Financial Weekly and Business Observer. Let them come up with their own headlines.
I only want one effect. Let everyone know that every cent of the Jiang family's money is stained with someone else's blood.
The night the news was released, the Jiang Group's stock price plummeted 37% in after-hours trading. It continued to fall after the market opened the next day. By the midday close, the market value the Jiang family had accumulated over 3 generations had evaporated by over 20 billion. Financial media swarmed in like sharks scenting blood. Business Observer published a 10,000-word long article with the headline, "The Collapse of the Jiang Empire." From the freeze of 680 million to the evaporation of 20 billion, who is pulling the strings behind the scenes? The article did not mention my name, but someone in the comments guessed it. The top liked comment had only 5 words. The intern husband. You see, the internet has a memory. That offhand label Jiang Ciyuan had casually tossed out at the cocktail party was like a boomerang. It flew for 3 days and ultimately smashed back into her own face with pinpoint accuracy. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Assistant Chen knocked on my office door, his expression graver than usual. He placed a document in front of me, the bankruptcy restructuring application the Jiang Group had submitted to the court, stamped with Jiang Guotao's personal seal. The seal imprint was crooked. Not stamped normally, more like someone had pressed it down by grabbing his unconscious limp hand.
Jiang Ciyuan is still in the ICU and hasn't come out.
Jiang Ciyuan signed this application. Assistant Chen paused. Boss Shen, Fang from Zinda is asking, should we take this opportunity for a full acquisition of Radiant Capital? I picked up the bankruptcy restructuring application and glanced at it. Jiang Ciyuan's signature was at the bottom. Her handwriting had always been neat and elegant, but the signature on this document was crooked, with several broken strokes, as if her hand had been shaking uncontrollably the entire time she signed. I could imagine what she felt writing her own name 3 years ago. When she signed Radiant Capital's first investment agreement, she could never have imagined that 3 years later, she would be signing a bankruptcy application.
Not in a hurry.
I set the document down.
Tell Fang Qiyuan to hold his position. Acquiring Radiant Capital right now would be letting them off too cheaply. What I want is not the Jiang family's money. What I want is for everyone in the Jiang family to remember. What they owe me cannot be repaid with money. Assistant Chen nodded and turned to leave. I stopped him.
One more thing.
Contact the director of Central Hospital. Tell them El Capital is willing to cover the full cost of Jiang Guotao's medical treatment. Assistant Chen froze for a second, clearly not expecting this instruction. Boss Shen, you want to let him live. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze falling on that bankruptcy restructuring application. If he dies, it's all over. I want him alive to watch the Jiang family's empire rot away inch by inch, to watch the empire he built with his own hands be carved up piece by piece. Back then, when my mother stood on that rooftop looking down, he was in his office toasting with champagne. Now the wheel of fortune has turned. It's time he tasted what that felt like. After Assistant Chen left, the office fell quiet. I picked up my phone and saw a message from Fang Qiyuan. It was not work-related, it was a screenshot, a hot post on a financial forum with the title, Radiant Capital's Jiang Ciyuan kneels in public as recording exposed, intern husband turns out to be the big boss behind El Capital. The view count had surpassed 5 million. The comments were lined up with people repeating the same phrase, best feel-good story of the year. I turned off my phone and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. In the building across the street, a few lights were still on in Radiant Capital's offices, scattered and sparse, like the last few lit portholes on a sinking ship. From this angle, there was a height difference of 12 floors. I stood 12 floors higher than Jiang Ciyuan, but climbing these 12 floors had taken me 3 years. Every step of the way had been built on the humiliation she had given me. On the 7th day of the Jiang family's collapse, Jiang Ciyuan appeared downstairs at my apartment building. That evening, a torrential rainstorm was raging, so heavy that the entire city's drainage system could not handle it. The water on the roads had risen above people's ankles. I lived on the 47th floor of a high-end apartment building next to Financial Street, a penthouse duplex. Outside the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights blurred in the storm. Assistant Chen called to tell me Jiang Ciyuan was downstairs. At the time, I was in my study, reviewing the next quarter's investment plans sent by the Ludwig Fund.
She doesn't have an umbrella.
Shen's just standing there in the rain. Assistant Chen's voice sounded hesitant.
Boss Shen, should I have security ask her to leave?
No need.
I thought for a moment.
Let her stand.
After hanging up, I continued reading the documents. Richard from Ludwig was planning to add an additional $200 million in investments in the Asia-Pacific region, targeting artificial intelligence and new energy. This project had nothing to do with the Jiang family, and nothing to do with Radiant Capital. The Jiang family's era was over. My era had just begun. An hour later, I closed my laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window to look down. From the height of 47 floors, people on the ground looked as small as sesame seeds. But I still recognized her, wearing a black overcoat, standing below the entrance steps of the apartment building, drenched through by the downpour. No umbrella, no assistant, no black Maybach. She stood there alone, like a bird whose wings had been soaked by heavy rain. When I took the elevator downstairs, the front desk concierge glanced at me, hesitating as if wanting to say something. I waved my hand and pushed open the glass door to walk outside. The rain instantly soaked my shirt. The rain was so loud that 2 people standing face to face would have to shout to be heard. Seeing me come out, Jiang Ciyuan jerked her head up as if jolted by electricity. She had lost a lot of weight. In 7 days, her cheekbones had become prominent. The black overcoat hung on her loosely, empty like a child wearing an adult's clothes. Rainwater streamed down her hair. It was impossible to tell on her face what was rain and what were tears. Shen Xu, she called my name, her voice so hoarse it was barely audible.
I've come to beg you.
I said nothing, standing under the awning and looking at her. The curtain of rain kept us apart by 3 paces, the exact same distance she had made me keep for the past 3 years. The only difference was, this time, I was the one standing on higher ground. My father is still in the ICU.
The doctors say he could have a secondary hemorrhage at any time.
Radiant Capital's bankruptcy restructuring application was rejected by the court.
All the suppliers are suing us.
All the bank accounts have been frozen.
Even the medical expenses are. She stopped here, her lips trembling violently, rainwater pouring into her mouth. Are being paid by you.
That's right. I'm the one paying, I said, my tone as calm as if commenting on today's weather.
What? Not enough?
That's not it. She shook her head, shaking it desperately. Her hair stuck to her cheeks, an utter wreck.
Shen Xu, I know you hate me.
I said all those things. I was despicable.
I was blind.
I treated you like a tool.
I did you wrong.
But can you, for the sake of 3 years as husband and wife, leave the Jiang family a way out?
I'm begging you.
And then she dropped to her knees. Her knees struck the pooled water, splashing up a spray. The hem of her black overcoat floated on the surface of the water, like a flower that had been trampled into the mud. The rain poured down. I looked down at her. She knelt there, like a statue being scoured by the storm. There was a time when she was the person sitting in the back seat of a Maybach, tapping the desk with her pen, telling me without looking back, "Don't let me down." And now she knelt before me, without even the courage to lift her head and look at me. "Jiang Ciyuan, do you remember that watch you gave me?" She froze, not understanding why I suddenly brought this up. 6,800 yuan. Entry-level mechanical watch.
You didn't even bother tearing off the price tag.
I pulled that watch out of my trouser pocket. I had been carrying it with me all these days, not to commemorate anything, but to remind myself. When you gave me this watch, your expression was like you were throwing a bone to a beggar. No, worse than a beggar. At least when you throw something to a beggar, you glance at them once. When you gave me this watch, you didn't even lift your head.
Shen Xu, She wanted to explain but realized there was nothing she could explain.
3 years ago, when your father executed the hostile takeover of Shen Corporation, I pulled a document out from the inner pocket of my suit jacket, a white envelope containing 2 papers, the divorce agreement and a reconciliation statement. My mother stood on the rooftop of Shen Corporation for half an hour. When the security guard stopped her, she said one sentence to your father, "Jiang Guotao. Remember this? The Shen family today is the Jiang family tomorrow." I flung the divorce agreement in front of her. The paper landed on the water's surface, but she did not need to read its contents to know what it was. Because she had drafted that agreement herself 3 years ago. It stated clearly, the husband voluntarily waives all property distribution. She probably had long forgotten this agreement. After all, when she had someone draft it back then, it had taken less than 20 minutes.
Sign it, I said. Then you can leave.
Trembling, she picked up the pen. The rain had soaked the paper, the ink bled and spread, but she still signed her name. Every stroke was crooked, exactly like the signature on that bankruptcy restructuring application. By the way, I added while she was signing, you thought 5.8 billion was Zinda's true floor price? That was fake data I had Fang Chiwen fabricate.
Huasheng's true floor price was 4.2 billion.
What you swallowed was a bomb I personally fed you.
Jiang Ciyuan looked up.
The last glimmer of light in her eyes went out.
Like a lamp extinguished by the wind?
Like a star falling into the abyss. Like the final gleam in my mother's eyes sinking into darkness as she stood on that rooftop 3 years ago. She knelt in the downpour, clutching the divorce agreement now sodden and ruined by the rain.
Her mouth hung open, but not a single word came out.
She finally understood.
From beginning to end, this marriage was a trap I had laid. She was never the one playing chess. She had always been my pawn.
I married you. I crouched down, face to face with her.
The rain was loud, but every word I said landed in her ears with absolute clarity, precisely to wait for today. Jiang Ciyuan, from beginning to end, you were nothing but my chess piece. I stood up and turned to walk back inside. Shen Xu, she screamed hoarsely behind me. Did you ever, even a little bit, genuinely love me? I paused for one step. In that pot you used for sobering soup, every time I added hawthorn and dried tangerine peel, I counted. I made it 473 times, I said. Then I pushed open the glass door and walked into the elevator without looking back. The moment the elevator doors closed, I heard a heart-wrenching wail rise through the rain. I did not know if she was crying for herself or for something else. The elevator rose all the way up, 47 floors. I looked at my own face in the mirrored metal wall. 3 years ago, this face had walked into Jiang Ciyuan's life with a different identity card. 3 years later, it was leaving at a height she could never reach. The rims of my eyes stung a little, but I did not let anything fall. It was not worth it. 3 days after the divorce agreement was signed, I went to the psychiatric sanatorium in the north of the city. My mother had been living there for 3 years. On that night 3 years ago when Shen Corporation went bankrupt, after she was stopped by security on the rooftop, her entire being collapsed. Not physically, mentally. She did not speak. She did not recognize anyone. Every day she sat by the window staring at the sky outside, like an empty shell drained of its soul. The doctors said it was post-traumatic stress disorder and required long-term convalescence. I had placed her in this sanatorium and visited her every week. Every time I came, she did not recognize me. She would smile at me, but it was a smile meant for everyone, gentle, hollow, like a pair of parentheses with nothing inside. Today was different. When I pushed open the door to her room, she was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, a camel-colored blanket draped over her knees. Sunlight streamed in from outside and fell on her graying hair. 3 years ago, her hair had been completely black. In the first month after the bankruptcy, half of it turned white overnight. Mom? I crouched down in front of her and took her hand. She looked down at me, her gaze as gentle and vacant as always. I thought today would be another day she did not recognize me. But just as I was about to get up to pour some water, she suddenly spoke. Jouer, you've gotten thin.
4 words. I felt as if I had been nailed to the spot.
3 years. It was the first time in 3 years she had called my name. The first time she had truly looked at me with those eyes that had always gazed out the window. The vacancy in her eyes was gone. Inside them now was all the aching love a mother has for her son. Mom, you recognize me. I heard my own voice trembling. Mom has always recognized you. Her hand gently touched my face, her palm dry and warm. Mom just didn't want you to worry. Didn't want you to see Mom's sadness. Every time you came, Mom held back from talking to you, afraid that the moment I opened my mouth, it'd ask you about revenge. Mom didn't want you living in hatred. I buried my face in her palm, my shoulders shaking violently.
3 years.
I had performed in front of Jiang Ciyuan for 3 years, hidden myself in front of everyone for 3 years. I had Fang Qiwen set the trap, had Lu Zhengting play along, had Richard deploy 680 million U.S.
dollars from North America.
Like a precision machine, I executed every step of the revenge plan, completely expressionless the whole time. But now, crouching before my mother, hearing her call my name with a voice that had been silent for 3 years, all my armor shattered completely. Mom, it's over. I lifted my head and held her hand.
Jiang Guotao is lying in the ICU.
The Jiang family's entire empire has collapsed.
Radiant Capital's bankruptcy restructuring application was rejected. Jiang Ciyuan signed the divorce agreement. Everything they owed us, I've taken it all back. My mother was silent for a very long time. So long that the light from the window shifted from her left cheek to her right. Then she gently shook her head.
Jouer, Mom never wanted you to take revenge for Mom.
Mom only wished that once you were well, once the Jiang family got their comeuppance, you would no longer be bound by the past. She pulled out a document from under the blanket. The paper was yellowed, the edges curled up. It had been folded and unfolded countless times, the fibers at the crease lines nearly splitting apart. I took it and opened it. It was a printed screenshot of financial news. The date was the day Shen Corporation went bankrupt 3 years ago. The headline read, Jiang Group acquires Shen Corporation in lightning deal. Acquirer representative Jiang Guotao states the transaction is normal commercial activity. The article was accompanied by a photo. In the photo, Jiang Guotao stood in front of the Shen Corporation building, suited and booted, exuding triumph. That building was where I had grown up. It was 20 years of my mother's blood, sweat and tears. It was the foundation of 3 generations of the Shen family. Jiang Guotao had used a hostile takeover to turn it into his trophy. My mother had kept this news clipping for 3 years. Every crease had been left by countless openings and closings over those 3 years. The paper was so thin, it was translucent. Mom kept this not to hold a grudge, but to remind herself Mom knows about all the suffering you endured. My mother's voice was very calm, like a deep pool of water. You endured in the Jiang family for 3 years. Every time you visited Mom, you smiled and said everything was fine. Mom knew you were lying, but Mom didn't expose it, because Mom knew you were waiting for an opportunity. She folded my hand shut, pressing that yellowed news clipping into my palm. Now the opportunity is here, Jouer. Don't look back. I stood up and gently gathered my mother into my arms. Her body was very light, much lighter than 3 years ago, like a leaf that could be scattered by the wind at any moment. The sunlight outside the window was very bright, falling on mother and son like a thin layer of gold leaf. When I walked out of the sanatorium, Assistant Chen was already waiting in the car. He handed me a document, the schedule for next week, the cover interview for Time magazine, Asia Pacific edition, an invitation to speak at the Davos Young Leaders Forum, 3 offer letters for visiting professorships from top business schools.
Boss Shen, one more thing.
Assistant Chen's voice suddenly softened. Jiang Ciyuan passed away at 4 o'clock this morning. I looked out the car window at the trees flashing past in retreat, silent for a few seconds. My mother had said she never wanted me to take revenge for her. But I knew that if time could turn back to 3 years ago, when Jiang Ciyuan shorted Shen Corporation, he would still have pressed that confirm button without a moment's hesitation. Every step he had climbed by trampling on the corpses of others was a step laying the groundwork for today's outcome. The Jiang family had not lost unjustly in the slightest.
Notifying Shiwen.
Close the net, I said, rolling down the car window to let the wind hit my face. The residual value of Radiant Capital, acquire it at 50% of market price. As for the rest, no need to ask me anymore. Half a year later, on the NASDAQ screen in Times Square, New York, the latest cover of Time magazine Asia Pacific edition was rotating on display. The man on the cover wore a dark gray suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt left undone. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 47th floor of El Capital headquarters, the entire city skyline behind him. A line of English text was printed above the cover. Translated, it was just 6 words, from pawn to player. The day the exclusive interview aired, El Capital completed a controlling acquisition of the 3rd largest new energy fund in North America, with a transaction value of $1.7 billion US dollars. Richard from the Ludwig Fund popped champagne on sight. Fang Qiwen posted a photo with me on his social media, captioned 3 years.
Worth it.
Lu Jingting was the first to call and ask if I would consider merging with and acquiring Huasheng Group. I said I had no interest for the time being. Huasheng's portfolio was too small. Lu Jingting was silent on the other end of the line for 3 seconds, then burst out laughing. Back at that cocktail party, when I called you Xiao Shen, I really never imagined this day would come. I said I had imagined it, from the very first day. At the same moment the interview was airing, on the other end of this city, in a wet market, Jiang Ciyuan was wearing a faded gray coat. In her left hand, she carried a canvas bag containing 2 bundles of greens and a bag of frozen dumplings. Her hair was casually tied in a ponytail, a few stray strands plastered to her forehead. On her face, bare of any makeup, fine lines and sunspots were visible. She stood at the market entrance waiting for the red light. When she looked up and saw the image on the giant screen of the office building across the street, me, sitting in the recording studio for the Time magazine interview, the entire wall behind me displaying the El Capital logo. The host asked me what the secret to my success was. Looking into the camera, I said, I have to thank every setback of the past 3 years. Her canvas bag slipped from her hand and fell. The greens and the frozen dumplings scattered across the ground. She bent down to pick them up, her fingers red from the cold. The plastic bags were blown everywhere by the wind. A passerby helped her pick one up and handed it to her. She kept her head low and said thank you, her voice very small, so small, it was completely swallowed by the roar of traffic on the street. After the passerby walked away, she leaned against a utility pole and slowly crouched down, burying her face in her knees. She crouched for a very long time, long enough for the vegetable vendor to pack up her stall, long enough for the streetlights to come on, casting a pallid white light overhead. No one recognized her. No one cared who the woman crouching at the entrance of the wet market was. A year ago she was the helmswoman of Radiant Capital, the heiress of the Jiang Group, one of the most dazzling names at the very tip of the city's pyramid. A year later, she crouched by the roadside clutching a plastic bag of discounted vegetables, just like everyone else crushed by life and unable to piece themselves back together, swallowed up by the rush hour crowds. Meanwhile, on the giant screen in Times Square, the image continued. The host asked me the final question. Mr.
Shen, if you could sum up the past 3 years in one sentence, what would you say?
I looked into the camera and remembered a certain morning 3 years ago. Jiang Ciyuan stepped out of her Maybach and strode through the company lobby without looking back, the sound of her high heels tapping out a lofty, untouchable melody on the marble floor. I remembered her holding a wine glass and introducing me to everyone. This is my husband. My intern husband, and the curve that lifted the corner of her mouth. I remembered that bowl of sobering soup I drank mouthful by mouthful, its temperature going from scalding to ice cold, exactly like the true nature of that marriage. I would say, I spoke into the camera, my voice traveling through the submarine fiber optic cables of the Pacific, through data streams crossing half the globe, appearing on the giant screen in Times Square, New York, and on every outdoor screen in this city, that when you stand at the pinnacle and look back down at the abyss, you realize that the people who trampled on you back then were nothing more than the stairs beneath your feet. The image froze. The subtitles slowly rose. Shen Xu, founder of El Capital. From intern to player. And behind the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 47th floor, I turned off the television broadcast and picked up that divorce agreement from half a year ago. The paper had dried completely, but the creases left by the rain were still there, like dried-up riverbeds. I placed it into the paper shredder and listened to the sound of the blades spinning, watching those signatures and clauses all turn into fragments that could never be pieced back together. Outside the window, the city was ablaze with lights at dusk. Traffic flowed like a river. I lifted the cup of coffee on my desk that had long gone cold and, facing my own blurred reflection in the glass, raised it in a small toast. To all those who have endured humiliation and borne heavy burdens. To all those who have stood at the bottom of the valley and gazed up at the stars. To all those who were crushed into pieces and still found the strength to rise again. Cheers.